April 21st, 1945, 6:47 a.m. The hills above San Terenzo, Italy. The morning arrives without mercy. Cold light breaks over the Ligurian Apennines, casting long shadows across ridges still wet with overnight rain. The earth smells of mud and cordite, a scent that has become more familiar than home. Second Lieutenant Daniel Inouye moves through the pre-dawn darkness with his platoon, 23 men whose faces he knows better than his own reflection. They are Japanese Americans, sons of immigrants, volunteers who chose to fight for a country that imprisoned their families behind barbed wire. The 442nd Regimental Combat Team go for broke. The ridge ahead is their objective. Intelligence reports call it lightly defended. Intelligence is often wrong. Inouye checks his Thompson submachine gun for the fourth time in an hour. His hands move with practiced certainty, fingers tracing the magazine, the bolt, the trigger guard. 24 years old, raised in Honolulu, pre-med student before the war. He remembers anatomy textbooks, the clean diagrams of muscle and bone, the precise Latin names for every part of the human body. He wonders if those textbooks included diagrams for fear, for the weight that settles in your stomach when you know the day ahead will ask for everything you have. Behind him, Private First Class Takahashi adjusts his rifle sling. The kid is 19. His hands shake slightly, though he tries to hide it. Inouye pretends not to notice. Fear is universal. Shame is worse. "Sir," Takahashi whispers, "think we'll be home by summer?" Inouye looks at the boy's face, still soft with youth, despite months of combat. "Keep your head down today, and we'll find out together." The platoon moves in a staggered line, boots finding purchase on the rocky slope. The terrain is unforgiving. Steep inclines, scattered pines, exposed ground that offers little cover. Every step forward is a calculation, a balance between speed and caution. In the distance, the Gothic line stretches across the Italian mountains, the last major German defensive position before the Po Valley. The war in Europe is ending. Everyone knows it, but knowing the war will end and surviving until it does are two very different things. At 7:15 a.m., the first shot cracks through the morning air. The sound is sharp, final, a period at the end of a sentence no one wanted to finish. Private Kimura drops without a sound, his helmet rolling down the slope. Inouye's training takes over before thought can interfere. "Cover! Find cover!" His voice cuts through the chaos as his platoon scatters, diving behind rocks, trees, anything that might stop a bullet. The ridge ahead erupts with machine gun fire. 3 positions, maybe 4. The intelligence was not just wrong, it was catastrophically, fatally wrong. The Germans have fortified this hill with interlocking fields of fire, concrete bunkers camouflaged with pine branches and soil, firing ports positioned to create a kill zone across the entire approach. Inouye presses himself against a boulder, his breath coming hard and fast. Bullets snap overhead, chipping stone, kicking up dirt. He can hear his men calling to each other, voices tight with adrenaline. Sergeant Hayashi is on the radio, trying to call for artillery support, but the words are drowned out by the hammering of German MG-42s. 1,200 rounds per minute. The sound is like fabric tearing, continuous and overwhelming. "We're pinned down!" Corporal Tanaka shouts from 20 yards away. Blood streaks his face from a grazing wound across his forehead. Inouye risks a glance around the boulder. The bunkers are positioned in a triangle formation, each one supporting the others. Standard German defensive doctrine, brilliant and brutal. The only way forward is through, and through means crossing 40 yards of open ground under concentrated fire from 3 heavy machine guns. It is, by any rational assessment, impossible. Inouye's mind calculates distances, angles, probabilities. He thinks of his medical training, of triage, of acceptable losses. 3 bunkers, 23 men. The math is simple and terrible. If they stay pinned down, artillery will find them eventually. If they retreat, the Germans will pursue, cutting them down on the exposed slope. The only option is forward, and forward requires someone to move first. His hand tightens around his Thompson. "Hayashi!" he calls out. "Covering fire on my signal. Concentrate on the left bunker." "Sir, you can't—" "That's an order, Sergeant." Inouye pulls a grenade from his belt. Mark II fragmentation, 4-second fuse. He has thrown hundreds of these in training, thousands in combat. His arm knows the weight, the arc, the exact moment of release. But training was never under fire like this, never with death so immediate and certain. He breathes once, twice, then rises. The world explodes into motion and sound. His platoon opens fire, rifles and Thompson guns creating a suppressing wall of lead. Inouye sprints forward, legs pumping, lungs burning. The ground rushes past beneath his boots. 20 yards, 30. The Germans adjust their fire, tracers arcing toward him like malevolent fireflies. He feels the air crack beside his ear, feels something tug at his uniform sleeve. Not hit. Not yet. At 15 yards, he pulls the pin and hurls the grenade. The throw is perfect, a lifetime of baseball games in Honolulu parks distilled into one moment of desperate precision. The grenade sails through the bunker's firing port and disappears inside. 4 seconds of eternity. The explosion is muffled, contained within concrete and earth. Smoke vomits from the firing port. The machine gun stops, one down. Inouye doesn't stop running. Momentum is survival. He angles toward the second bunker, already pulling another grenade. The Germans inside are faster now, expecting him. Fire concentrates on his position, bullets kicking up dirt around his feet. He zigzags, making himself harder to hit, every evasive movement instinctive. Sergeant Hayashi leads half the platoon forward, using Inouye's assault as cover. They advance in bounds, fire and movement, the fundamental rhythm of infantry combat. But the third bunker has them in its sights, and men start falling. Private Oshiro, Corporal Nakamura. Names and faces Inouye knows, lives he is responsible for. He throws the second grenade. Another perfect throw, another explosion. 2 down. The third bunker is different, larger, reinforced. The machine gun inside is firing in disciplined bursts, conserved ammunition, professional gunnery. Inouye realizes with cold certainty that this is the command position, manned by veterans who will not break easily. He is 10 yards away when the pain hits. It starts in his abdomen, a white-hot spike of agony that steals his breath. He looks down and sees blood spreading across his uniform. Stomach wound. His medical training catalogs the injury with clinical detachment, even as his body screams. Organs perforated, internal bleeding, fatal without immediate surgery. He has minutes, maybe less, but the bunker is still firing. His men are still dying. Inouye stumbles forward. Each step is an act of will over biology, mind commanding a body that wants to collapse. His vision tunnels, edges going gray. He pulls his last grenade, fingers clumsy with shock. The bunker looms ahead, firing port dark and hateful. 5 yards now, close enough to see the muzzle flash inside, close enough to smell the burnt powder and hot metal. He cocks his arm back to throw. The world becomes light and thunder. The German inside the bunker has seen him, has fired a rifle grenade in the half-second before Inouye could release his own. The grenade hits him in the right elbow, and the explosion is simultaneous impact and detonation. His arm disappears in a spray of blood and bone and tissue, not severed cleanly, torn away, shredded, hanging by threads of muscle and tendon. The hand is still there, impossibly, fingers still clenched around the live grenade, the spoon released, the fuse burning. Inouye stares at his own arm, at the ruined meat that was moments ago a functioning limb, and his mind fractures into a strange clarity. He is going to die. That much is certain. The stomach wound alone would kill him. The arm is just confirmation. But the grenade is live, and if it detonates near his body, the shrapnel will kill the men behind him, the men who followed him up this God-forsaken hill. His left hand moves with a will of its own. He reaches across his body, grabs the grenade from his dead right hand's grip, and tears it free. Tissue rips. Blood sprays. The pain is beyond description, beyond anything human physiology should be able to process. But he has the grenade now, clenched in his functioning left fist, and the bunker is 3 yards away. He throws. Left-handed. Awkward. But close enough that accuracy hardly matters. The grenade tumbles through the air and into the firing port. This time, when the explosion comes, it is final. The bunker's machine gun stops. Smoke and dust billow out. No more fire from inside. 3 bunkers, all silent. Inouye falls to his knees. The world is spinning, tilting on an axis that no longer makes sense. His right arm, what's left of it, hangs useless, pumping blood into the Italian soil. His abdomen is on fire, each breath a new discovery of agony. His men are rushing forward, voices calling his name, but the sounds seem distant, underwater. He forces himself to stay conscious. Not yet. Not until he knows they're safe. Sergeant Hayashi reaches him first, face pale with shock. "Medic! Medic, goddammit!" "The bunkers," Inouye manages. His voice sounds strange, thin. "Check the bunkers. Make sure they're clear. Sir, you need—" "Check. The bunkers." Each word is a battle. Hayashi hesitates, then nods and moves forward with 3 men. They approach the silent fortifications carefully, rifles ready. Long seconds pass. Then Hayashi signals, "All clear." Only then does Inouye allow himself to collapse. Corporal Tanaka, the platoon medic, is beside him immediately, hands moving with frantic speed, tourniquet above the elbow, pressure on the abdominal wound, morphine syringe jammed into Inouye's thigh. The drug takes the edge off, but the pain remains, a vast and overwhelming presence. "Stay with me, Lieutenant," Tanaka says. His voice is shaking. "Stay with me." Inouye tries to focus on the medic's face, but it keeps blurring. "The men. Count off. I need to know." "They're counting now, sir. Just stay awake." The count comes back. 18 effectives, 5 wounded, 3 dead. The math swims through Inouye's fading consciousness. 23 started the assault. 20 men still alive. Not perfect. Never perfect. But alive. He thinks of Kimura, the first man down. 19 years old. A letter from his mother in his pocket. Unread. He thinks of Oshido and Nakamura, their families in internment camps in California, waiting for news that will never bring comfort. He thinks of the 20 men who survived, who will go home, who will live because he couldn't accept the alternative. The evacuation is chaos and urgency. Stretcher bearers half carry, half drag him down the slope. Every jostle sends fresh waves of agony through his body. He loses consciousness twice, wakes to faces he recognizes, voices speaking his name like a prayer. The aid station is a blur of white tents and efficient hands. A surgeon, young and exhausted, looks at his arm and shakes his head. "We have to take the rest," the surgeon says. "It's already gone. We're just making it official." Inouye understands. The arm is dead tissue now, a source of infection, of gangrene, of death. Better to lose it completely than die trying to save what cannot be saved. "Do what you have to do," he whispers. The surgery is crude, necessary, brutal. No time for finesse when dozens of other wounded are waiting. They cut away the destroyed tissue, cauterize vessels, close what can be closed. When Inouye wakes, his right arm ends just above the elbow. A stump, a termination point, the place where his future changed. But he is alive. The pain is constant in the days that follow, a baseline of suffering that morphine can only dull. But worse than the pain is the phantom sensation, the ghost of fingers that still clench, an arm that still reaches. His brain hasn't accepted the loss yet. It keeps sending signals to muscles that no longer exist, expecting responses that will never come. A chaplain visits on the 3rd day. "You did something remarkable up there, Lieutenant." Inouye stares at the ceiling. "I lost 3 men. You saved 20, and probably dozens more in the units that would have been sent to take that position if you'd failed. Do the dead care about that math?" The chaplain has no answer. There is no answer. The 442nd visits him when they can, soldiers filing through the hospital tent to see their lieutenant, to reassure themselves he's still alive. They don't talk about the assault much. Veterans rarely do, but their presence says everything words cannot. They were there. They saw. They understand. Sergeant Hayashi sits beside his bed one evening. "The regimental commander put you in for the Medal of Honor, sir." Inouye closes his eyes. "I don't want it. That's not how it works. You don't get to choose. I just wanted everyone to make it home." "We know." Hayashi's voice is quiet. "We all know." The war in Europe ends 2 weeks later. May 8, 1945. VE Day. Celebrations echo across the Allied world, but in the hospital, the wounded simply mark another day of survival. For them, the war ended the day they were hit, and it will continue ending, day by day, for the rest of their lives. Inouye is evacuated to a hospital ship, then to the States. The journey is long, uncomfortable, marked by pain and morphine and the endless rocking of the sea. He thinks about his future often now, about what a one-armed man can do with his life. Medical school seems impossible. Surgery requires 2 hands, so does most meaningful work. His family is waiting when the ship docks in San Francisco. His mother sees him and begins to cry, silent tears that speak of relief and grief intertwined. His father stands rigid, traditional Japanese stoicism, fighting with visible emotion. They don't ask about the arm. They don't need to. "You came home," his mother finally says. "That's all that matters." But Inouye knows it's not all that matters. 23 men went up that hill. 3 didn't come home. Their mothers are somewhere else, receiving different news, living different futures. The mathematics of war are always incomplete. The Medal of Honor ceremony comes months later, June 2000, 55 years after the battle. A different century, a different America. President Clinton stands on the White House lawn, reading citations for Japanese-American soldiers whose heroism was delayed by prejudice, by a nation that couldn't reconcile their race with their sacrifice. Inouye stands among them, an old man now, 75 years old, a United States Senator. The stump of his right arm is hidden beneath his suit jacket. He has learned to live with one arm, learned to write left-handed, learned to adapt and overcome. But he has never forgotten the weight of a grenade clenched in dead fingers, the moment when his body became negotiable currency in exchange for other lives. The president drapes the medal around his neck. The ribbon is blue, spotted with white stars. The medal itself is bronze, cast in the shape of Minerva, surrounded by laurel. It is beautiful and terrible, a physical representation of the day everything changed. Afterward, reporters ask him about heroism, about bravery, about what it felt like to charge 3 machine gun nests with a stomach wound and a destroyed arm. Inouye thinks carefully before answering. He has had decades to consider these questions, decades to understand what happened on that ridge above San Terenzo. "I wasn't being brave," he says finally. "I was being stubborn. There's a difference. Brave men think about what they're doing. I just couldn't accept losing anyone else." Sometimes survival isn't about courage. It's about refusing to acknowledge the alternative. He pauses, looking at the medal in his remaining hand. Every man in the 442nd was fighting 2 wars, one against the Germans, and one to prove we belonged in the country that imprisoned our families. We couldn't afford to lose either one. So when the moment came, when it was impossible and suicidal and mathematically insane, we went forward anyway. Because going forward was the only option that let us look our families in the eye afterward. The reporters scribble notes, but Inouye knows they can't capture it completely. How do you explain the weight of representing not just yourself, but an entire community? How do you convey the pressure of being Japanese-American in 1945, wearing an American uniform, while your parents lived behind barbed wire, fighting to prove loyalty to a nation that doubted you at every turn? The 442nd became the most decorated unit in American military history. 21 Medals of Honor, over 18,000 individual decorations, every member eligible for a Purple Heart, many 2 or 3 times over. They paid for acceptance in blood, in shattered bodies, in lives cut short or permanently altered. Was it worth it? Inouye doesn't know. He's never known. On good days, he looks at the generations of Japanese Americans who grew up without internment camps, who became doctors and lawyers and teachers without having to prove their loyalty, and he thinks, Maybe it was. On bad days, when phantom pains shoot through an arm that hasn't existed in decades, when he sees the names of the dead in his dreams, he's not so sure. But he knows this: when the moment came, on that ridge in Italy, he didn't hesitate. Not because he was fearless, but because his men were watching. Because 3 bunkers stood between them and survival. Because someone had to go first. He went first. And when the rifle grenade tore his arm away, when every fiber of his being screamed to collapse and surrender to shock and pain, he didn't. He couldn't. Because the grenade was live, and his men were behind him, and dying was acceptable, but failing was not. That's what he understands now, 75 years later, standing on the White House lawn with a medal around his neck, and a stump where his right arm used to be. Heroism isn't about fearlessness. It's about functioning despite fear, about choosing action when every rational impulse screams for paralysis, about protecting others when you can barely protect yourself. The arm that wouldn't let go. That's what the men of his platoon called it afterward. Even destroyed, even dead, his hand had clenched that grenade until his functioning hand could pry it free and throw it. Muscle memory persisting past mutilation. Biology refusing to acknowledge defeat. Inouye lives with that image. Some nights, he wakes up reaching for things with an arm that isn't there, his brain still convinced that 2 hands exist instead of 1. The ghost persists, haunting the space where flesh used to be. But he also lives with another image. 18 men, alive, walking down from that ridge, carrying their dead with reverence and their wounded with care. Walking because someone went first. Walking because impossible became negotiable when the alternative was unthinkable. That's the story no medal can fully capture. That's the truth that lives in the space between decoration and deed, between recognition and reality. Daniel Inouye lost his arm saving his platoon, but in the end, he saved more than that. He saved the idea that Americans of any ancestry could serve with equal valor, could bleed with equal sacrifice, could stand with equal honor. The 442nd proved that citizenship isn't defined by race, but by willingness to fight for something larger than yourself, even when that something has not always fought for you. The price was measured in shattered bodies and abbreviated lives. The payment is still being calculated, decades later, in the descendants of internment camp prisoners who became senators, surgeons, scientists, in the slow, painful integration of a nation that almost lost its soul to fear and prejudice. Was 1 arm worth that? Were 3 lives, 5 wounded, 23 men forever changed? Inouye doesn't answer that question anymore. He just remembers the morning of April 21st, 1945, when the sun rose over Italy and 23 men climbed a hill they weren't sure they'd descend. He remembers the weight of command, the mathematics of sacrifice, the moment when his body became currency in a transaction he didn't fully choose but couldn't refuse. He remembers his hand, clenched around death, refusing to release it until the very last second. And he remembers going forward, always forward, because that's what soldiers do when there are no good options left, only necessary ones. The medal hangs heavy around his neck, but not as heavy as memory, never as heavy as that. Character count, 21,847 characters. I need to expand this to meet the 35,000 to 45,000 character requirement. Let me continue with deeper emotional layers and additional context, continuing the narrative. The years between that April morning and the medal ceremony are not smooth. They are jagged, difficult, marked by surgeries and setbacks and the slow reconstruction of identity. In the immediate aftermath, still hospitalized stateside, Inouye faces the practical realities of single-armed existence. Simple tasks become complex puzzles, tying shoes, buttoning shirts, opening jars. Every action requires relearning, recalibration. His left hand, never dominant, must now carry the entire burden of physical interaction with the world. The occupational therapists are patient, encouraging. They show him adaptive techniques, specialized tools, prosthetic options. But Inouye resists the artificial arm at first. It feels like surrender, like admitting the flesh and blood original is truly gone. The empty sleeve, pinned to his shoulder, is at least honest. It doesn't pretend to be something it's not. His fellow 442nd veterans visit when they can, men still in uniform, still serving, still fighting the war that for Inouye has moved from external to internal battlefield. They bring news from Europe, from the Pacific Theater, where some units have been redeployed. The war against Japan continues, though everyone knows it's ending. The atomic bombs will fall in August, and suddenly everything will stop, as if a conductor has dropped his baton mid-symphony. Sergeant Hayashi visits in July, shortly before shipping out to occupation duty in Japan. He looks older now, harder, a man who has seen too much to ever be young again. "I keep thinking about that morning," Hayashi says quietly. They are sitting outside the hospital, watching the sun set over hills that don't remind Inouye of Italy, but do anyway. How you just went. No hesitation, no theatrics. You just went. Someone had to. That's what I keep trying to understand. Why you? Why not me? I was your sergeant. I was supposed to lead assaults like that. Inouye considers the question carefully. It's one he's asked himself countless times during sleepless nights when phantom pains shoot through an arm that no longer exists. "Because I couldn't order anyone else to do it," he says finally. "The moment I saw those bunkers, I did the math. Whoever went first had maybe a 1 in 10 chance, maybe worse. How do you look a 19-year-old kid in the eye and order him to take those odds? How do you choose who lives and who dies? So you chose yourself. It wasn't really a choice. It was just the only thing that made sense." Hayashi is quiet for a long moment. Then, "The Army is giving posthumous awards to Kimura, Oshiro, and Nakamura. Silver Stars. Their families will receive them." The names hit Inouye like physical blows. 3 men who didn't come down from that hill. 3 mothers who received telegrams. 3 families who buried empty caskets or waited for bodies shipped home in sealed containers. 3 futures terminated on an Italian mountainside because intelligence was wrong, and someone had to fix that mistake. "Their families are still in camps?" Inouye asks. "Were. The camps are closing now. Everyone's being released. But where do you release someone to? Most of them lost their homes, their businesses, everything. They're getting out of prison camps just in time to mourn sons who died fighting for the country that imprisoned them." The bitter irony is inescapable. The 442nd fought for American ideals, while American reality held their families behind barbed wire. They proved loyalty through blood, while their parents needed passes to leave designated zones. It is a contradiction that cannot be reconciled, only endured. In September, Inouye is finally discharged from the hospital. The war is over. Japan has surrendered. The world is celebrating peace, but Inouye feels unmoored, uncertain. For 3 years, his identity was clear: soldier, lieutenant, platoon leader. Now he is a veteran with 1 arm and no clear purpose. He returns to Hawaii, to parents who have waited and worried and prayed. His mother embraces him carefully, afraid of causing pain. His father shakes his remaining hand, Japanese stoicism cracking just enough to show pride and relief. "You did your duty," his father says simply. It is the highest compliment in his vocabulary. But what is his duty now? Inouye doesn't know. The future that seemed clear before the war, medical school, because a surgeon, is impossible with 1 arm. He cycles through possibilities, discarding each. Teaching, perhaps, or law, something that requires intellect more than physical dexterity. The nightmares start around this time. Not every night, but often enough. He is back on that ridge, charging the bunkers, feeling the grenade explode against his elbow. But in the dreams, he never manages to throw the last grenade. It detonates in his hand, and the shrapnel tears through his men behind him. He wakes, gasping, reaching instinctively with an arm that isn't there, phantom fingers grasping at nothing. His mother finds him one night, sitting on the porch at 3 a.m., staring at stars that look nothing like the stars over Italy, but trigger memories anyway. "You should sleep," she says gently. I do sleep. Then I wake up. She sits beside him, silent for a while. Then, your father and I, we don't understand war. We didn't serve, but we understand sacrifice. We understand what it means to give up part of yourself for something you believe in. Did you? Inouye asks. Believe in it? When they forced you into those camps, when they took everything, did you still believe America was worth defending? His mother doesn't answer immediately. When she does, her voice is thoughtful, measured. We believed in what America could be, not what it was. The camps were wrong, cruel, born of fear and hatred, but the idea underneath, that all people deserve dignity, freedom, equality, that idea is worth fighting for, even when the reality falls short, especially then. It is the most profound thing anyone has said to him since he came home. More profound than medals or commendations or speeches about heroism, because it names the contradiction and claims it anyway, holds both truth and betrayal in the same sentence without flinching. The idea of America versus the reality of America. The 442nd fought for the idea, even when the reality imprisoned their families. They believed in potential rather than present tense, and somehow, improbably, their sacrifice helped close the gap between the two. In 1947, Inouye enrolls at the University of Hawaii, studying government and economics. His missing arm is obvious, impossible to hide, but he refuses to make it the center of his identity. He learns to take notes with his left hand, to carry books in a backpack, to type on a typewriter with Hunt and Peck efficiency. Other veterans are on campus too, men with visible and invisible wounds, all trying to build peacetime lives from wartime fragments. Law school follows. Then, politics. In 1959, when Hawaii becomes a state, Daniel Inouye is elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. 2 years later, he moves to the Senate. He will serve there for 50 years, becoming one of the most powerful and respected legislators in American history. But he never forgets April 21, 1945. He carries it with him into every negotiation, every committee hearing, every vote. The memory of that morning shapes his understanding of sacrifice, of duty, of the price of leadership. When other senators grandstand or play political games, Inouye remains measured, serious, focused on actual outcomes rather than symbolic gestures. He has seen what real stakes look like. He knows the difference between rhetorical combat and the kind where people die. His reputation grows, steady, principled, impossible to intimidate. Colleagues learn that beneath his quiet demeanor is steel forged in Italian mountains under German machine gun fire. You don't rattle a man who pried a live grenade from his own destroyed hand. The Medal of Honor ceremony in 2000 is not his first brush with recognition. He has received the Distinguished Service Cross earlier, along with Purple Hearts and Bronze Stars. But the Medal of Honor is different. It is the nation's highest military decoration, reserved for valor above and beyond the call of duty. 22 Japanese-American soldiers received the Medal of Honor that day. 22 men whose heroism was documented but delayed, held back by prejudice and bureaucracy, until a review process in the 1990s finally acknowledged what should have been obvious decades earlier. Inouye stands among his brothers in arms, men now in their 70s and 80s, bodies bent with age but spirits unbroken. Some are in wheelchairs, some use canes, all wear the weight of history on their shoulders. When the president places the medal around Inouye's neck, there is applause, but Inouye hears something else beneath it. He hears the echo of machine gun fire, the screams of wounded men, the silence that follows explosions. He hears Private Kimura hitting the ground, the first casualty of that morning. He hears his own voice calling for covering fire, his feet pounding up that slope, his hand, the hand that no longer exists, throwing grenades with desperate precision. History compresses time strangely. 55 years have passed, but that morning exists in perpetual present tense, always happening, never quite finished. The Inouye who charged those bunkers and the senator who stands on the White House lawn are the same person and completely different people simultaneously. Time has transformed him, but the core remains. The man who couldn't accept losing his people, who went first because someone had to. In the years after the ceremony, Inouye continues serving in the Senate. He becomes president pro tempore, third in line for presidential succession. He helps shape foreign policy, military appropriations, civil rights legislation. His influence is vast, but exercised quietly, through relationship and reputation rather than theatrics. But he also becomes something else, a living reminder, a bridge between past and present, between the America that put Japanese Americans in camps and the America that elected them to its highest offices. His presence in the capital is itself a form of testimony, a walking embodiment of imperfect progress. Young Japanese Americans visit his office sometimes, students and activists and military recruits. They want to meet the man who represents their community's journey from suspicion to acceptance, from internment to integration. Inouye greets them all with the same quiet dignity, answering questions, listening to stories, encouraging them to pursue their own paths. The 442nd gave you opportunities we had to fight for, he tells them. Don't waste them, and don't forget the cost. Freedom is never free, but it's always worth the price, as long as you remember what was paid. He serves until 2012, when death finally claims what German bullets could not. 88 years old, 68 years after that morning in Italy. His body is borne to the Capitol Rotunda, where he lies in state, the highest honor Congress can bestow. Thousands file past to pay respects, but Inouye would probably have appreciated more the presence of the 442nd veterans who come to say goodbye. Their numbers are dwindling now, age claiming those whom war could not. But they come anyway, men in their 80s and 90s, some in wheelchairs, some on walkers, all wearing their distinctive unit insignia, a torch of liberty on a blue background. Go for broke, their motto, their identity, their truth. At the funeral, his fellow veterans don't eulogize him with flowery speeches. They tell simple stories. The time Inouye shared his rations with a younger soldier. The way he always checked on wounded men before seeing to his own injuries. His habit of learning every soldier's name, every family situation, treating each man as an individual worth knowing rather than an anonymous unit number. He never acted like a hero, one veteran says. He just acted like that was what you did. Like it was normal to charge 3 machine gun nests with a stomach wound. Like it was obvious that you'd keep fighting with one arm blown off. He made the impossible seem like just another day at work. That, perhaps, is his greatest legacy. Not the Medal of Honor or the Senate career, but the example of determined ordinariness in the face of extraordinary circumstances. He never claimed to be special or superhuman. He just refused to accept alternatives he found unacceptable. When someone had to go first, he went. When leadership demanded sacrifice, he paid it. When his body broke, he found ways to continue functioning. The arm he lost in Italy never grew back, but its ghost shaped everything that followed. Every vote he cast, every law he supported, every young person he encouraged, all of it traceable back to that morning when he learned that the body is negotiable, but principle is not. The bunkers above San Terenzo were destroyed long ago, reclaimed by time and vegetation. The exact spot where Inouye's arm was torn away is now covered in grass and pine needles, indistinguishable from any other patch of Italian hillside. No marker identifies it. No plaque commemorates what happened there. But the 20 men who walked down from that ridge alive carried the memory with them. They told their children and grandchildren. They kept the story alive, not as myth or legend, but as witnessed truth. This happened. We were there. We saw a man decide that his body was an acceptable price for other lives. And in that decision, in that desperate sprint across exposed ground toward impossible odds, Daniel Inouye became something larger than himself. He became proof that heroism doesn't require invulnerability, only commitment. That leadership means going first, especially when the odds are worst. That some debts can only be paid in flesh and blood, and some men are willing to pay them anyway. His right arm is buried somewhere in Italy, probably in a medical waste pit long since covered over and forgotten. But it accomplished its final mission. The grenade it held didn't detonate near his men. The bunker fell. The platoon survived. Sometimes the body is the only tool available. And sometimes, when all other options have evaporated, it's enough. Daniel Inouye understood that. He lived it. And for 67 years after Italy, he carried the lesson in an empty sleeve and a stubborn refusal to let physical limitation define possibility. The arm is gone. The man remains. And the story endures, passed from generation to generation. A reminder that courage is not the absence of fear, but the presence of will. That some things are worth dying for, and therefore worth living for. That a single morning in April can echo across decades, shaping not just one life, but an entire community's trajectory toward dignity and recognition. Go for broke. They did. He did. And the cost, measured in blood and bone and shattered flesh, purchased something that cannot be destroyed or diminished. Proof that heroism transcends race, that valor recognizes no boundaries, that when the moment demands everything, some people give it anyway. April 21st, 1945. Forever present, forever past. Forever the morning when Second Lieutenant Daniel Inouye learned that leadership sometimes means becoming the price you're willing to pay. He paid it, without hesitation, without regret. The rest was just living with the consequences.